Thank you, Akshay. 70%, that is stretching the optimistic figure a bit, but I'll accept it. And I'll also blame Akshay for gender imbalance in this panel. But I want to thank Manjeet for making sure that at least there is some balance. And I should also say that you are real hardcore intellectual policy wonks here. But I know that you are here in respect of the ocean on the other side of the road. So welcome to this last session on the blue economy, on the business of blue economy. And I'm very pleased that we have a small but truly sterling panel. We have Venkat on the other side, who is a very distinguished partner in a successful venture firm, which deals with a lot on the side of blue economy, among other things. So you would have a truly practical glimpse of what this thing is all about. We have in Cyrus a former national and international civil servant, now turned a scholar, and he has done a lot of work in this field, particularly dealing with the small island states, which is very much playing a leadership role in this domain. In Regina, we have someone representing the Philippines, a lawyer by profession, a former senior official of the government, who knows a lot about the oceanic issues in her part of the world, but I'm not sure how much of that she's going to share with you. It will all depend on your curiosity and the provocation that she may receive from the panel. I'm a slightly odd man out here, a former diplomat. But the reason why I'm sitting here is that I spent some 12 years in various parts of the Indian Ocean region, serving as a diplomat in 4 Indian Ocean capitals, and also dealing with some other Indian Ocean nations from the Ministry of External Affairs once upon a time. But more importantly, in the last 2 years, I had the unique privilege to represent Gateway House in a national level task force, which produced probably what is India's second full-scale report on blue economy. And this gave me the chance to travel to coastal India and deal with and talk to a lot of business people in this field. And therefore, I hope I'll have a chance to, based on that experience, ask a few sharp questions to our panelists. The basic intention is really to encourage panelists to talk and share their experiences and their perceptions on the blue economy. Just to set one or two broad comments before I begin to invite each of them. I think the very first question or the issue that I want to raise is as to what really the blue economy mean to all of you. Blue economy is, as we all know, a multidisciplinary knowledge, is at the cutting edge of knowledge. It's very important that we have business and civil service and scholarship and law and a bit of diplomacy spread out here. And I know in the audience there are oceanographers and there are many others who are interested in the ocean, especially we have several admirals sitting here. And so we have to see that this is a subject not just for one or two subject to domain experts, but it is truly multidisciplinary. People often ask as to what is the difference between ocean economy and blue economy. And I think the answer probably is that this is the new phrase. This is the more fashionable phrase to use. And maybe one more nuance which is there. And this is that blue economy very much emphasizes the sustainability part. There cannot be any reference to blue economy unless and until we are very clear that we have to nurture and protect the oceanic resources. So in simple words, blue economy is the sum total of the health of the oceans plus the wealth that we want to derive from the oceans. I think if we could be clear about that, it will help in carrying forward the debate as well. There is a very strong support for the concept from the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. I think there is the specific goal, number 14, which states that in terms of the life below the water in the oceans, we have to nurture them and we have to use them sustainably. So in that broad concept, may I come back to this fundamental question as to what does the blue economy mean to you? And I would request Cyrus to start. Feel free, speak for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then we will move to the other colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity from Gateway House to be here. It's a real privilege. Also a wonderful opportunity to meet with so many distinguished people from such wide fields, and superb conference arrangements. I'm sure many others have said it, but let me add my voice to that. Thank you. Well, for me, I've been working on development policy issues across a very wide range of areas over a number of years. And what does the blue economy mean for me? It goes much beyond a simple economic proposition. For me, the blue economy is a potential pathway to sustainable development for, particularly in the area that I principally involved in, for developing countries in Africa and in small states. It's an opportunity to address food security. It's an opportunity to address energy security. It's an opportunity for the first time, I think, since historical terrestrial development to transform economies. It's an integrated strategy. It's a very, very exciting field. For me, it's a refreshment of everything I've been dealing with or involved in economic development policy. It straddles many of the areas that we talked about in earlier sessions. Just the session gone by, technology. Technology today is transforming what we understand as the maritime economy. As we have driverless cars, we have ships that have no pilots to take them, automated ships. We have automated marine surveillance mechanisms that can monitor vessels from hundreds and hundreds of miles away and report back. We have automated mechanisms now to feed fish that may be in a cage 500 kilometers away, or to feed them antibiotics because something on the screen has said that they're looking a little bit sick. So technology is coming into this. It's an interface with so many development areas. It does have complexity as well. It includes, as Chair has said, it includes sustainability. It also includes the need to protect the oceans and to resuscitate the oceans where this is necessary, safety and security of oceans. For me, it's almost like a triple helix. There are 3 strands. They're constantly in coordination with each other. Security of the oceans, sustainability of the oceans, and growth. For me, the area of interest, though, is growth.
Thank you. So, promising potential, but a lot of complications, and that is what we need to truly understand. Venkat, you are the practical man, and we would very much like to hear from you as to what the blue economy mean to you.
Thanks. As Cyrus said, I would like to repeat, this has been a wonderful experience for me to participate and listen to all the interesting thoughts and processes which are there here. And blue economy like that to me was something similar, and I had no clue about that till I joined Aavishkaar a couple of years ago. And Aavishkaar generally focuses on, early stage businesses which are inclusive and engaging with the low income demographic. And when, just to take a little step back, when I met Jerry, who is an American trying to develop a sustainable fishery project in Indonesia about 5 years ago. And that's when I got to realize that fish, to expand on the food security aspect, is one of the cheapest sources of protein. And we have been talking about protein inflation in India for some time. And that's when I started thinking a little bit more. And then I realized that the extent of technology that he was mentioning is going beyond whatever is regulatory requirement. For example, traceability is an important aspect in food retail. And that was being extended to customers, especially in the US and Europe, wanting to know about the source of the fish and where is it caught and is it sustainable and traceable. And that's how I got introduced to this whole aspect of this blue economy. And that's when I realized also that actually the fishermen, like the farmers, are actually paying a very high price, and they're taking all the risks in making this food available and getting very little in return. And when we did this project to try and see if you process the fish at source and with traceable standards, is that something which we can access US markets? This company has got customers like Walmart and others. And we realized that it is a market access technology rather than, as yet, customers, they like it, but I don't think they're yet ready to pay for it, because I think now they want A plus B rather than just food alone or traceability at a premium. But I'm hopeful that things will change. And when I started discussing that a little bit more, I realized that there were many more aspects of the economy. And that's when I just spoke to Manjeet, I guess, about a year or so ago. Then we realized that the whole issue of fish farming versus, wild catch, because wild catch has actually petered out some 20 years ago. And so all the increase in the fish is only coming from farming. And if you do coastal or inland fish farming, there's a high risk of disease. And hence people are going deep into the sea. And how is it that they're able to go deep into the sea? They're actually using all the technologies of construction and operation, which the energy industry has been doing it for oil and gas. And that's why these platforms are actually quite expensive. And we have seen investments of 50 million, 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, even in farms in Southeast Asia. And that's when I realized that actually the technology elements are actually much higher, and they are building upon the advances in the construction, which has been learned from the energy industry when they go offshore. And when we dig deeper, and then we found that the same thing has been, the new energy which people are looking out for is actually batteries. And then for the batteries, you need many rare metals, and many of them are found at the bottom of the ocean. And I know it's a tricky aspect of how do you keep energy exploration, deep sea exploration along with the eco-life that is there below. And that's when we came across another company called Nautilus, which is, in Papua New Guinea, has been doing quite a lot of that work, and all the equipment, it seems, has been delivered to site in January of this year, and hopefully it will start production later this year. And that's when we realized that, yes, you're thinking about rare minerals, and where are you getting them? Yes, you can go to China, you can go to possibly conflict-ridden Africa, but another source is also here, and we realized that it is possible to do that. Of course, another source of energy has been offshore energy, which Europe has developed quite a lot. Just to put it in perspective, a typical wind turbine in India would be about 2 megawatts per turbine, but the offshore turbines in Europe are already 8 megawatts, and GE is now talking about 12 megawatts. So you're getting a 1:6 jump with the same turbine, and the plant load factors are more than double of what's there on land, and hence the returns are much, much more clearer than what they would be on land. Yes, there are technical issues, but you're using the same techniques which has been developed for offshore construction. And then when we pushed further, and then we saw that tourism was another industry which is very much shore-based. In fact, I'm sure all of you have heard that Great Barrier Reef has been decreasing a lot, and a lot of people are going there to see it as the last thing, or it's the last chance. And what you say, the tourism industry seems to be promoting travel to many of these sites as to say, okay, see it before it vanishes. Talking to Ambassador Bhatia, and he was talking about Alaska and what you say, Greenland, Machu Picchu.
I'll come to you. I think you've been very wide-ranging, and there's great complementarity between what both of you have said. But let me now invite Regina so that she can take us to the Philippines.
Hi. Thank you, Rajiv, for the very generous introduction. But let me preface this. I do not represent the government of the Philippines anymore. So that also gives me the right to speak freely. But anyway, blue economy in the Philippines is contextualized. You have to understand, for us, it has to be a sustainable framework to harness the most out of our seas. The Philippines is, by its very geography, the fact that it's an archipelago, is very, very rich in marine resources. Okay, we are at the center of the Coral Triangle, where 78% of the world's coral treasures are. And yet, 60% of our population live along the coastline, but the highest incidence of poverty belong to the fishermen. We have the poorest fishermen in the world. They live at about $3 a day or less, okay? So for us, a blue economy should be able to first harness and have a meaningful contribution to the national economy. There's a study done by the Ateneo de Manila University, and it said there that they found that, if we're able to harness, if there is accelerated technology transfer, our marine ecology, the ecosystem itself, can give about $900 million into the Philippine economy. That said, we are also very climate vulnerable. We are the third most climate vulnerable country in the world. I think in a year we get landfall 20 typhoons, maybe. So every year we spend a lot of, every year we spend a lot of the national budget goes to rehabilitation, and it's constant. So aside from having a meaningful economic contribution, we also are looking into adaptation, mitigation. These are the things that matter to the people who are actually harnessing the blue economy, giving the Filipino people this blue economy. Apart from that, we have to look also into infrastructure. In the last couple of decades, the Philippines has been in an infrastructure deficit. So there has been a struggle to bring that to the people as well. So blue economy in the context of the Philippines is a more complicated and very, it's filled with texture. And when that is fulfilled, I think that it really has a promising, it's very promising. I think that it will make huge impact on the national economy and its people.
Thank you very much. I think this is a fairly good base on which to now build things in a bit more specific manner. I think the rational justification for blue economy is now fairly self-evident. We have been hearing since yesterday a very popular figure here that we were about 7.3 billion people a year and a half back. And in about 30 years, we are going to be close to 10 billion people. So the question, the challenge that humankind truly faces is whether we would have enough food to begin with that could be produced from the land. Land which is barely 30% of the total surface of the planet. So really, we have no choice but to go to the oceans and not exploit it, but harness it in order to be able to fulfill, not wholly, but in a large measure, the food requirements of human beings. You know, you talked about protein and fish and many other things as well. So this is one issue. And the other, of course, is energy and job creation. And then the whole normative value system has been imposed onto the blue economy in terms of creating jobs, creating equity, women empowerment, gender equality, and above all, the welfare of the coastal communities. This all is now part of the sustainable development philosophy. So the question that we need to ask, and I'm coming to you, Rustom, because you have studied this in a very structured and scholarly manner, is it possible to envisage that we can secure the practical goals set for the blue economy while meeting all these requirements which have been sort of added to it or imposed on it? That is the big question.
Do I get a bonus if I answer? It's a complicated question. Well, I mentioned it's an exciting field, and one of the reasons that it is exciting is there is a real prospect for some countries at least that the blue economy can be that pathway to a transition out of poverty, transition out of a lack of a diversification, a lack of high value added jobs, etc. And in some sense, a paradox is that the innovation and the prospect for this has come from the smallest states, small island developing countries. Why? Because they're small, they're islands, and they look to the sea de facto. And the opportunity is there for them to transform from terrestrial to ocean-based economies. So what are they doing that offers the promise to get to this? And in my view, these are lessons that can actually be exported to other countries, much bigger economies as well. The one is that they embark as their first step on a diagnostic of what their economy is all about. They look and see the structure of their existing economy. Many have been producing agricultural commodities and sending them abroad. They've been hit, of course, by reduction in protection for their exports or commodity price fluctuations, etc. They look at the structure of it and they see that if they transform to a marine-based economy, which includes aquaculture, it includes marine tourism, it includes renewable energy, it includes bioprospecting, which is something we haven't particularly mentioned, which is a major opportunity. It includes all maritime transport, shipping, ports, etc. Tourism, of course. If they transition to this, they find that over a period of time, and if they plan it, most crucially, they are able to make that transition. And several countries have started this, which is why it's so exciting. And the ones that are leading are not the advanced economies that in some sense take the marine environment and the marine domain as granted and not as a transformative tool, but just an addition to the GDP. These other countries are taking this as their future, their long-term future. They're even calling themselves big ocean economies in the case of, for example, the Seychelles or Mauritius Pacific Island economies, because their marine space is several thousand times the size of their land mass. So they do have the prospect of transforming. What are they doing, and what are the crucial ingredients that may be able to be transposed? One, they embark on a diagnostic study. Two, they start at the leader's level. They start at the level of a prime minister or a president, and the structure for planning is housed there. This is happening right across African countries now. Many countries are starting the process, but the ones that are succeeding, and I mentioned 3, and with lots of data and detail, it's becoming available: South Africa, Seychelles, and Mauritius, for innovations in technology and finance and for various reasons. So they identify their priorities, they develop strategic plans, they map the ocean. It's a very methodical process: marine spatial planning, integrated coastal zone management and planning, intersectoral planning. These sound like tags, but they are acutely intensive work streams, and they are going about it, they are doing it, they're identifying 3 or 4 among what might be, for example, 12 or 14 different marine activities. The study done by Fiki, I think it outlines approximately 12 areas in which India could consider opportunities for a blue economy. These countries have gone beyond the second report concept. They've gone to actually envisioning, planning for, and integrating into their national development planning a blue economy strategy and a roadmap with targets and so on. So, not to belabor, but at the continental level in Africa, they have come, I think, second to the European framework for the marine economy. This really an extraordinary, well thought through maritime strategy. It was developed a few years ago, but they haven't had the capacity to implement it. It's another constraint.
Thank you. I think this is a very significant point you have made talking about these 3 countries. I think in particular, Mauritius and Seychelles have already secured a great deal of progress. Before we talk about India, I would request Regina to tell us a bit more about the Philippines. Do you have a kind of a national blue economy strategy for the country, particularly on the development side, the business side? And if so, what kind of approach do you follow on this? Thank you.
Okay, there has been long-term and medium-term plans to address or to harness the blue economy of the Philippines. Problem is, the problem is you have election cycles, right? And the problem is also, how do we even transform the plan? Where do we get the money to harness our own resources? That's another problem, which I think is also very, very crucial. But where the Philippines are right now, I think they are at a very crucial time where everyone, our neighbors most especially, realize the wealth of our own seas. And that presents to the Philippine government, I think, and I don't speak for the Philippine government, a unique chance. I think this is a window that should not be missed. A unique chance to really shape policy. Policy in terms of how are we going to harness, how are we going to partner, how are we going to invite investors, yet at the same time hold sacred our own territory, sovereign rights. And I think that in the Philippines, we are at the crossroads of developing a meaningful policy towards a blue economy. In the past we have had, it's not unprecedented. People think, I think the misconception is the Philippines now is hypersensitive or eager to have, to invite investors. But it's not unprecedented. We have had, for instance, I give you an example. Malampaya, it was just west of Palawan, one of the biggest islands of the Philippines. It's gas rich. It's within the Philippine territory. But Shell harnesses the gas for us. They act as our agent. So this signals an openness for the Philippine. I think in terms of, and I want to really address this because a lot of foreign investors will ask, will often ask us in government. I mean, I speak up from experience before. Often ask us, your constitution is so limiting because according to our constitution, everything from the territorial bed to our EEZ can only be harnessed and exploited by Filipino citizens. It's reserved. Now, then the investors say, yeah, we can help you harness, but we want, as the Philippines now is at a very unique, we now have a unique standpoint that yes, we are open to you becoming our agents, but at the same time, it has to be balanced with sovereignty, sovereign rights and all of that. So yes, Reggie, there is a policy, and I wish that the intent to have a long-lasting policy, one that will probably take 20 years as medium term. And I hopefully we stick to the program. Huh?
I think you have given me a window by referring to the election cycle, and I can give you the hint of my next question to you, but you can wait for a while. Because I want to, between Venkat and I, very briefly mention here the situation in India, because a lot of foreign guests are sitting here, and I'll do it in a very fair and balanced manner. I think in the last few years, we have started hearing a lot about ocean economy or blue economy policy for this country. And it essentially has been stressing both on the security pillar and the growth pillar. And I think in the last couple of years, slowly we are shifting from the usage of ocean economy to the blue economy itself. So this is indeed, I think, a sign of progress. We have also seen that a few elements of blue economy are being given very high degree of priority, which is essentially being called as the port-led development strategy. So there's been a great deal of announcement and crafting of plans. A huge amount of money has been set aside that Mr. Prabhu also, the minister yesterday in his message, talked about. So these are definitely good signs. But do we have a national blue economy policy? Or do we have a national blue economy strategy? I'm not so sure. Are we thinking about it? I think yes, in some circles so. We indeed are thinking about it. But this is where people like Venkat come into the picture who are not really waiting for a national level policy or a strategy or a 5-year plan. They are just going ahead and doing their own thing. And my question therefore to you at this stage is, back to what I said, are you able to secure what we are now presenting to you as theory or goals of blue economy while looking after the social side or the normative side? And if so, how are you doing it, Venkat?
I completely agree with you that whenever we are dealing with natural resources, one of the key issues is for us to see as to how is the community engaged with this. And that's one of the reasons why when we looked at these kind of opportunities, we have been very clear in trying to understand what's the community's feeling about it and what is the national policy towards, in the specific case where we went ahead, Indonesia had, I think, at about the time when we made the investment, that's mid-2015, last half of 2015, government took a very serious stance against IUU, and then they said that all the fishing which has to be reported, even if it is transshipped, has to be done. There is still no rules about transshipment of fishing, but they wanted all the fish to be processed locally. That's the first part of the policy which we were comforted with. The second part which was there was how are the national rights of the resources being allocated to the people of the region. So that is the second aspect of what we have put in place. The third aspect which is there is to see that there is proper records and reporting of what is the catch to regulatory bodies, and to see that it is we are making it available. And in any case, our systems have gone one step ahead and said that not only is it being reported at the point of landing, but also at the point of when you're catching it in the sea. So we can go one level back by putting trackers onto the boats on which these fish are fishermen are using. And this is the next step. Then the last step which we have supported is, these are all line caught fish. That means the fishermen are catching it by line. That means there is no nets, there is no seine. So in that sense, if you have 5 people, you can manage maybe 5 lines. And so you can catch only that much. And that is the most sustainable thing. And so we have tried to ensure these kind of, all these disciplines are integrated into these kind of projects. All of this is, in any case, monitored by, civil society organizations, which ensure that while we can see what is on land, but they have their own systems to figure out how are the communities actually doing. And we ourselves have our own training centers and programs to ensure that this is being, this is the policy and this is being followed.
To share with you personal experiences, which I'm sure many of you have actually experienced when thinking about these matters. I had the chance to do a cruise in Alaska, to which Venkat was referring, this summer. So we were on this huge ship for 7 days, 3,000 persons. And it was a totally waste neutral ship. Not a piece of filth or garbage was thrown into the ocean for those 7 days. And yet we know how serious and grave the problem of plastics into the ocean has become. The World Ocean Summit just ended in Mexico, and even if you by mistake caught smallest of the reports, you would have heard as to how now plastics, and especially microplastics, the quantum is increasing rapidly in the oceans. And where is this plastic going? This plastic is going into the stomach of the fish. And I need not add as to where this fish is going. It is going into us. So we release plastic into the ocean, and it is coming right inside the human bodies. And this is where really I want to ask you, Rustom, as to what is your study sitting in the UK, working for a Canadian think tank. What is the situation in some of the other leading blue economy countries of the world, US, EU, Norway? How are they doing it? How can they produce wealth and yet try to nurture the health of the oceans? How is it being done?
There are many different models. I wouldn't even say that they're models. Each country has evolved its own set of practices. And interestingly, very few of them have adopted formally a national plan and a national vision. The US doesn't have a national plan for the ocean, but it does quantify maritime activity and puts out data about what's being produced, what global value added is coming from various marine activities. A lot of it is coastal tourism and recreation, actually. That's a very, very large part of their marine economy. But they don't have a formal national plan. Let me think now. China, again, does not have a formal national plan. It links the development of its ocean activities to coastal zone planning. So it will say that in such and such a coastal zone, we would like to do aquaculture, this, that, and the other. But it won't be a plan that embraces nationally aquaculture as a target, as a priority, marine bioprospecting or deep sea mining. It won't have a comprehensive plan like that. The region that has, I think, certainly Norway, Portugal, countries in Northern Europe most definitely have national integrated strategic plans for the ocean, and they prioritize specific sectors where they have a comparative advantage. Of course, mariculture, which is marine, it's farmed fish, but in the deep sea, is an enormous activity for Norway. I mean, these cages are incomprehensibly large in deep water and are managed remotely. And the haul of fish is, again, inconceivably large amounts. Healthy, fresh, without the diseases that fish are prone to, managed, regulated, distributed, tracked, everything. The model that's certainly for developing countries is really very interesting and yields a lot of lessons about integration and addressing a variety of the challenges that come from the blue economy and developing it is the European Union. The European Union has a multiplicity of programs to develop the blue economy for its membership. And the blue economy is not only coastal, it can even be inland, it can be waterways, and different countries and different regions define the blue economy according to their circumstances. So in the European Union, there is a mechanism to promote skills and reskilling of people who have lost jobs in other industries and are now moving to the blue economy. There are science and technology initiatives to harvest the best scientific knowledge. There are links between academia, government, and the private sector. And these are not trivial links. They are centers of excellence. There are training, feed through information about what the latest science is showing in selected areas. If you are seeking resources from the European Union for aquaculture, you need to have a national plan for aquaculture. You can't simply say, I want to do a bit of aquaculture. You need to demonstrate a national plan, how you're planning to do it, with what resources, with what constraints, etc. Coupled to this is something that other developing countries are learning from, which is how to mobilize private sector investment in these activities. Because it is not possible at all to develop a blue economy through public sector and public finance. There is large public finance for developing countries through the GEF, Global Environment Facility. Africa has a huge program, $3.5 billion for the blue economy, a joint venture with the World Bank, FAO, and the GEF. It's not all dispersed, but it's available for those that develop plans. But in the context of advanced economies and, say, the European Union, some of these public resources and international public resources may not be as readily available, but the EU does provide them. But they also have an explicit and quite intensive program of convening meetings, of outreach, of mobilizing partnerships with the private sector. Just 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a conference of 400 public and private participants of EU countries to talk about opportunities, to talk about partnerships, to talk about funding initiatives and innovative financing. And I wasn't there, certainly, but it will have yielded perhaps billions of dollars of new investment in the EU. So the tools are out there to learn from, whether you're a big country or a small one.
Hearing you, I think the takeaways become so clear that I don't probably even have to list them out for a country such as India. There's a great need for further research by our own researchers and the strategic community, there is a need for broadening the awareness about the issues on blue economy. And I think there is a very strong need for us to look at how some of these leaders in this field are actually handling these issues. But let me just go back to the election cycle. I want to bring through that the geopolitical angle, although it was discussed in much depth, at least in 2 sessions, one in the morning between Shyam Sir and Richard Haas. And then there was an exclusive session on China. But for blue economy, this is important. The closest part of the oceans where geopolitics is playing a relevant game here is the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. In South China Sea, until recently, there were 2 countries, Vietnam and the Philippines, which were extremely concerned about China's approach on South China Sea. And it was said that it was not just strategic factor, but there was a very strong economic factor, because clearly some studies show that there is a huge treasure of energy and other metals and minerals in South China Sea. So it is strategic as well as economic. So in a way, you were in the government when the Philippines took a certain position on South China Sea, and then, as you said, elections took place, the new government came and things changed. As a scholar now, as a private citizen, how do you look at this very tricky problem, which has its own impact and implications on the blue economy prospects in the region?
You're going to get me into trouble, Rajiv. Is that the objective? And I regret now for saying election cycle, but it is what it is. You know, it is, the goal here is to really have a comprehensive plan that hopefully is a little bit resilient to election cycles. And I'm speaking in a way that I'm sure some developing countries, or maybe even developed countries, can identify. You know, policy shift. But the objective is, or the hope is, that there's some permanence. There should be some basic principles that remain constant and unchanged, not just for purposes of politics, but also for, on the side of implementation, project implementation. Let's go practical. You cannot, the shift in policy will affect projects. And these projects are what matters on a grassroots level. Let's speak of ports. We have 7,107 islands, low tide. High tide, 7,300 low tide. Is it? Or something like that. But when you speak of policy shifts every 6 years, and a particular administration has plotted where ports should be, then you have this confusion of a disjointed infrastructure network, which makes it hard for fishermen, for shipping to get the most out of the treasures of the sea. Now I'm trying to deflect the issue from the election cycles, but I think the objective, on a very, I think it's inevitable and an overarching issue when it comes to the South China Sea, the treasures of the Benham Rice. I think that's, the West Philippine Seas, the tribunal has already decided that's no longer disputed. What I think grabs the attention of the world is the Benham Rice, which actually is east of Luzon, one of the Luzon is the northern island group of the Philippines, and the Benham Rice is right on its east, okay? It is part of the Philippines continental shelf, and the UN has declared that. Now, why is that geopolitically? Apart from, yes, what you said, there is, it's found to be rich in methane hydrate or methane hydrate, which is said to be the new, the next big thing in energy. But apart from that, the location of Benam rice, it's right below Taiwan, and it's right beside Guam. So in Guam, of course, you have one of the most important U.S. air bases, Anderson Air Base. So that, I think, is what grabs the attention of the world insofar as those waters are concerned. But let me bring it back to the Philippine context. In the Philippine context, I think what is overlooked, aside from the West Philippine Seas, the tribunal has decided. The Benam rice, that is within the continental shelf. And so therefore, the Philippines, it goes without saying, has sovereign rights over it. But we also, speaking of national plan, I just want to connect this with a national framework or a national development plan for the blue economy. I think one of the most overlooked sectors of the blue economy is the service aspect. Yes. 25% of the world's seafarers are Filipinos. They contribute annually $5 billion to the economy. We have the fourth biggest shipbuilding industry, although we are far fourth, next to China, Japan, and South Korea. Historically, if you look back to the Acapulco galleon trade, first shipbuilding community actually started somewhere in Cavite. It's south of Manila. So I think that's one of the most overlooked aspect of, and it's an aspect of the blue economy, which I think the Philippines should really look into in developing a more comprehensive long-term development plan for the blue economy. There's some concern that the seafarers or the people who have actually expertise in harnessing the blue economy have left the country because of obvious economic and financial circumstance. But yes, that's where we are, and I think that...
Thank you very much. I appreciate what you said. On my list, the last quick issue that I want to cover in the next 5 minutes is about the international cooperation in the field of blue economy. Because clearly oceans really have no borders. And in terms of options for India, there are quite a few platforms which have been available to us. On the sub-regional level, we look at BIMSTEC, which is a regional body of 5 South Asian countries and 2 Southeast Asian countries, Myanmar and Thailand. At the intermediate level, we have ASEAN, and between India and ASEAN, as the strategic partnership grows, blue economy has also been identified as a possible area of cooperation, and some activities have already started. But at the larger regional level, the most appropriate and apt body is the Indian Ocean Rim Association, or IORA. This is the body where serious thinking, long-term thinking about the blue economy is taking place. They have held 2 blue economy conferences. They have taken the matter further. They've started talking about the financing possibilities as to how to develop the business potential of the blue economy. And so this is where I want to ask 2 very quick questions, first to Venkat and then to you, Cyrus. As a business person who is obviously involved in investment here, do you feel that the private sector has enough options and its own financial muscle to leverage the opportunities, or do you feel that some kind of a public-private partnership would be indispensable, at least in the earlier years?
As we have discussed, I think the range of projects covered in the blue economy are very vast. So at the infrastructure level, typically that's where PPP comes in. Port-led or what should you say, conservation-led resources are typically done with the state in mind. The second aspect I would say is when it comes to minerals and things like that, minerals and energy, I would say minerals and energy, as long as the rights are clear, there are enough corporations as well as capital sources for those two aspects, that's energy and minerals. But fishing, I would say it's still very traditional. Fishing, traditional pools of capital only.
But the induction of technology becomes an issue. For example, even in the India-Sri Lanka context, when fish is finished in the coastal waters and we want to go out on the high seas, the poor fishermen who have been doing it traditionally, they don't have money to go into the modern, high-tech boats. They need some help, isn't it?
So when you're talking about vessel financing, that's typically, again, something which is asset financing. Like I think about ship the same way as somebody else will think about a truck. And it's the same mechanism. And as long as you have, the connect which is there with the people to say that, yes, those people will come back here and not run away from Sri Lanka to God knows where, then those kind of issues are the ones which will determine whether I'm comfortable with asset financing. If I'm not, then I will come back to going to collateral.
Thank you. I think appreciate that. What is your final word on the prospects of cooperation in IORA on blue economy? Do you think they are talking in theoretical terms, or are you confident that they would be able to produce the master plan for blue economy for the IORA region?
Yes, I'm very confident that the opportunity is there. I think it needs to be grasped. I think there's some constellation of factors that help. South Africa has just taken the chair of IORA for the next couple of years. Very, very good bilateral relations between India and South Africa. Oh, am I not talking? Can you, sorry, have I not been? So I'm saying that South Africa has assumed the chair of IORA for the next couple of years, and India and South Africa have excellent bilateral relations. In fact, historically, through a maritime connection, as it turns out. The opportunity is there to coordinate a strategy and to help link, at least on the western part of the rim, to the African integrated maritime strategy. Very solid opportunity. There's that, but there are two other areas of international cooperation, if I may just pop them in. One is an immediate one, which is that in next month, there's the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. The Commonwealth contains 32 small states, including many in the Indian Ocean and many African states that are members of AORA as well. There's an opportunity to put forward some proposals to the Commonwealth for Indian or collaborative Indian, South African, or whatever it might be, proposals to take forward a blue economy initiative. It could be just simply a support mechanism for, say, a skills hub or something that is fostering blue economy in a Commonwealth environment. And that can itself lead to gains for IORA. And then the third one is that IORA actually contains 4 G20 members. And the G20 itself has done a little bit of work on the blue economy. I was involved in that a couple of years ago, where they had a meeting with the Caribbean region, following from which the World Bank initiated and indicated that as a result of that meeting, they initiated a program, $100 and something million program for the Caribbean region. So there's an opportunity in 3 ways for India to venture, whether with other partners or individually, to advance them. Finally, on IORA, the most innovative financing mechanisms in the world on blue economy are in the Seychelles and Mauritius. and particularly Seychelles. They are launching a blue bond. They've just had a debt for finance, debt for blue economy swap, and all sorts of new innovations to crowd in resources. So great opportunity.
Thank you very much. Extremely insightful and useful. And now over to our envoys. There would be some questions from the floor.
First questions for Reggie and Cyrus. What are the prospects for blue economy to be exploited in an environmental friendly way when some countries don't respect the Convention on Law of Seas and some countries are misinterpreting it?
Surely you are chivalrous young man.
I'm always up for a challenge. Well, the prospects are difficult, but at the same time, many countries have grappled with this, and many regions of the world have grappled with this challenge. I use Africa as an example of how a breakthrough can start happening. Just a year ago, 2 years ago, African countries got together to tackle precisely this challenge where there's a national interest to advance and there's another national interest to resist. 31 countries in the continent got together and they signed the Lomé Charter, which is a charter that sets out practices and goals for maritime security, for harmonization of laws, and and integration of legal approaches to the blue economy. Once these measures start kicking in, and it's a long-term process, the blue economy, I should say, is not something that can transition in a 5-year period. It's a long-term strategy for transformation. But once they start kicking in, you will start seeing partnerships, you will start seeing an easing away of a purely national and sovereign attitude, because the recognition comes that the blue economy is explicitly a multi-jurisdictional activity, goal. It's a win-win if all come together. If some stay apart, you have challenges. There are bigger challenges, in fact, than the one that you mentioned. There are so many conventions. UNCLOS is one, Convention on Biological Diversity is another, and they all need to be harmonized. So at the international system, there are challenges as well.
Yes, everything Cyrus said. Agree. Well, I guess it's very challenging, but it's not unprecedented. Again, you have Malaysia. Let's not go too far. In Southeast Asia, you have Malaysia and I think Thailand back in 1979 who had overlapping maritime claims. And yet they entered into a very lucrative and very fruitful joint venture. So, I mean, it's difficult, it's challenging, but I think it can be done. Apart from that, we should not overlook the fact of fugitive resources, transient resources of the sea that go, which signals really that this should be a global community effort, especially so with Southeast Asia, where we share seas with Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, and that signal should set the tone, right? Yes, it's challenging, but it can be done, I think.
Okay, this one's for Venkat. What financial incentives should government contemplate in rewarding shipping companies that demonstrate the intent to use electric ships in their fleet?
That's electric ships in the fleet. Whatever little I've heard or seen, it's primarily in ferries. It's much more there in the ferry and the urban context rather than in the deep sea context, at least as per my knowledge. So in that sense, you think about it like a public transport system and how you price the product. So it's priced, the ferries are typically priced like how public services are, and financed through, I know Hong Kong, they used to finance it through land rights. So you sell the terminal rights and then use it. So if you want to, you can do it PPP way. And Hong Kong has done it, and even now it's pretty affordable. But incentive, unfortunately, I'm not tuned to thinking about asking government for incentives. I take what I get.
The investor, not the borrower at all.
We take what we get. So we can't wait for it. So
This one's for Reggie. How would Philippines and other countries in the region collaborate with foreign business or governments to protect their sovereign rights?
I think now, well, I can only speak from the Philippine and ASEAN experience. And I think that the ASEAN so far has been a great venue to act jointly on common interests and goals. Okay, that's it. Otherwise, you'll get me into trouble.
You have any other question, apart from the Philippines? No.
I have just one last question, maybe to Mr. Venkat. How significant will the deep sea mining be as a new industry, and what will be the time frame in which it will evolve?
I think the deep sea mining industry is, as I said, what caught my interest is how the battery industry is looking for minerals. And since battery is a big thing, so I do think it's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. But since how it will coexist with preservation of the marine life below, that is still unknown. And how will local communities, international bodies react is still unknown, so it's high risk. So as a consequence, is the resources at the bottom of the sea multi-billion-dollar? Answer is yes. The time frame, I guess you'll need to see some pilot projects before how all these working arrangements are put in place, because it's, as Cyrus mentioned, many of these conventions have to talk to each other. If you try to say that I have to comply with everything on day one, it won't happen. Then investments won't even trigger.
Make a couple of remarks in the end. But before I do so, I want to give a chance once again to the panelists in case they have any parting thoughts. Essentially, one would like to put across the view that blue economy is a huge opportunity for this part of Asia. Since I can only really speak for India, I can say that it's an opportunity which should not be missed. But it can really be fully exploited if, first of all, there is much deeper study and dissemination of knowledge about it among our own think tanks. So there is a lot of work to be done in the seminar rooms, but that will not be enough. I think unless and until we connect this knowledge to the business community of India, difference will not be made. This was my lesson that I learned when I traveled to coastal India, and I found that people working in the traditional sectors, fisheries, aquaculture, ships, transport, logistics, they were doing what they could in an environment which has been there for the past 3 or 4 or 5 decades. And there is still very limited knowledge of opportunities in the emerging sectors, the new sectors. Marine biotechnology, marine ICT, energy, renewable energy, and of course, deep sea mining, and other things which are coming up. We are not even talking about some of these new technologies that we have heard in a great detail since yesterday. So now that we are all agreed as to what blue economy is, the normative framework has been agreed, there is a platform for cooperation. That leaves only this geopolitical ghost hanging there. And one can say very clearly that the life would go on, that contestation and cooperation will have to coexist and will have to run along. We cannot use contestation or possibility of conflict as the excuse for not using this opportunity, because if we were to deny ourselves this opportunity, I think our grandchildren will not forgive us. With that, let me invite you to applaud our panel.
Thank you very much.